condition. Kyle Rittenhouse responding to his critics Monday night in an exclusive interview on Fox's Tucker Carlson Tonight about his acquittal last week for shooting 3 people during last summer's riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
In my opinion, there's no winners in this case. There's no heroes in this case. Right. I defended myself. I was attacked.
Rittenhouse insisted there was nothing racially motivated, as all of the people shot were white, and he supports the Black Lives Matter movement, although BLM activists say they don't want his support. Monday was the deadline for federal workers to be vaccinated against the coronavirus or face potential loss of their jobs. The White House task force continuing to encourage all adults or all vaccinated adults get another shot.
We've secured enough supply of all 3 vaccines for booster shots for every adult, as well as for the 500,000 first and second shots we continue to get into arms each and every day.
White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator Jeff Zients. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Santa's come in and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 3.99% and up to $50,000. And with the new Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas Loan contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier this year. Equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
To order some fuel supplies released from the country's strategic petroleum reserves as early as Tuesday in an effort to stabilize rising fuel prices, up 5% from September to October. Speaker Pelosi's hand-picked congressional panel investigating what happened at the Capitol January 6th is demanding testimony from several more people.
The House Select Committee has sent subpoenas to longtime ally of former President Trump, Roger Stone, and a controversial conspiracy theorist, Alex Jones. In addition, 3 other people accused of organizing rallies on that day have also been directed to tell what they know about how the riot came about. Committee Chairman Representative Benny Thompson says they need to know the origins behind the Capitol storming. Many of those subpoenaed are former Trump aides. One, Steve Bannon, has been indicted for contempt of Congress for refusing to participate in the process. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
After an investigation commissioned by the New York State Assembly Judiciary Committee has found what it calls overwhelming evidence that former Governor Andrew Cuomo engaged in sexual harassment and deliberately underreported COVID-19 nursing home deaths in the state. Charges have been dismissed against 2 leaders of a Massachusetts veteran home accused of mishandling coronavirus response for their patients.
The criminal case against former Holyoke Soldiers Home Superintendent Bennett Walsh and former medical director David Clinton was believed to be the first in the country tied to a COVID outbreak. It killed 76 residents, one of the deadliest at a U.S. nursing facility. The charges were based on a decision made at the start of the pandemic to consolidate 2 dementia units, which State Attorney General Maura Haley says put COVID-positive residents within feet of ones without symptoms. But a judge on Monday dismissed the indictments. The state can appeal the decision, and the AG's office says they're evaluating its options.
Fox's Tom Rigotti, and I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Hafude, konnichiwa,
Patois. Ciao. Enter for a chance to win the 76 Circle K World Cuisine giveaway. Be one of 3 lucky winners to win a passport of free food from around the world at over 15 different local restaurants. Just stop by any 76 Circle K, purchase $35 or more in fuel to get an entry form. Drive by today and taste the world with 76 Circle K's World Cuisine giveaway. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more details. Some conditions apply. Circle K, take it easy.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Another episode of Tall Tales kicks off in the usual way with my respectful reading of the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. I always have my copy of the Constitution here with me. It's an extreme, probably one of the most important books that I've ever owned. Short, with a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff in it. Okay, we go from the Second Amendment straight to Zemi Ikotny. You'll recall this is the part of the day where I examine the editorials of our 2 daily newspapers, fly-spec them for errors in grammar, English usage, fuzzy thinking, etc. And having done that, if one is superior, it is awarded the coveted Blue Star, which is highly prized by journalists. Occasionally, an interloper will sneak in. Someone, an editorial written by someone at other than the 2 daily newspapers. Lee Weber's gotten a couple of them. A couple of other folks that I can't remember have gotten Blue Stars. Yesterday, it was Troy Torres, who runs a scandal sheet called Candid News. Troy Torres is the 21st century muckraker in the image of guys like Upton Sinclair. Good for you, Troy. Okay, let's start out with the Daily News. The Daily News hit the ball really hard today. Here's the Daily News' editorial. Our view, honor the voices of Agana Heights. With 3,673 residents, Agana Heights isn't one of the larger municipalities on the island. But the people who live there have been among the most outspoken at hearings held by the Comisión Ifino Chamorro Place Names Project. And I mentioned yesterday the name of the chairman of the Comisión. It's none other than Hope Cristobal, who has a real special style of public speaking. Back to the editorial. In May, residents turned out to tell commission members they don't want to be called Tutuhan. I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to be called Tutuhan either. Would you, Jose?
No, my name is Jose.
Yeah. So.
True.
Mangisi Jose Pagone? Hekwatu tungu no matulaki na anya na ti Jose Pago in anya si Tutuhan. You wouldn't like that, would you, Jose? No. Last week, during another hearing, they said the hyphenated proposal of Agana Heights Tutuhan is also unacceptable. They want the village to be called Agana Heights. We urge the commission to listen to them. Names are identity. People should have the right to choose their names, and it's clear that this village wants to remain Agania Heights. The discussion started days earlier on the village What's Up chat, where one resident commented, Agania Heights is our, and I mean our village, and we already expressed to leave our village name as it is. We live here, and no one can tell us to change. If you want Tutuan, then name your village Tutuan. If you're so crazy about Tutuan, where does Robert? Robert used to live in Baza Gardens.
He's also claiming, where's Baza Gardens?
Baza Gardens is actually, is it Agate? Or Jonia?
Yeah, Cross Island?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's Agate. Anyhow, if you want Tutuan, go ahead, name your village Tutuan. Hope, I don't know where Hope lives.
In all our hearts, Bob.
That's true. The editorial goes on, we urge the Commission to listen to them. Name as you were. The discussion started, I think I already read that part. On Thursday, one after another, residents stood up before the commission members and testified that the name is important to them, to their families. I was born in Agania Heights. I was raised in Agania Heights. That sounds like a Lulian Guerrero, doesn't it?
This is my village.
Yeah, Ray. You see my shirt? It says, I love Agania Heights. Number 1. Okay, so let's stick to this. You know, why change the name? I don't like another name. My parents died here. It's going to remain Agania Heights, so let's hear it for Agania Heights, she said, as the audience applauded. Commissioner Robert Underwood explained that the restoration of place names is a good way to honor the ancient people. Traditional place names tie future generations to past generations and promote the island's heritage. Did you know that once upon a time, Jose, that Kenosha was known as Southport? That was the first name it had. Makes sense. It's the southernmost port on Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. Southport.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. And you've been around Milwaukee. If you were to take I-43 out of Milwaukee, the first exurb you'd come into would be Mukwonago, Mukwangago. This is a story I tell about how Mukwonago got its name. There were a couple of what we used to call Indians, we have to call them Native Americans now, who were standing on the shores of Phantom Lake when these two French fur traders sailed up. And they shook and howdied with the two Indians, and one of the fur traders said to one of the Indians, what do you call this place? What's the name of this place? And one Indian said to the other one, Mukwonago, which in their language means, what did he say? And it's been Mukwonago ever since. Yeah. So Underwood, this I see. So this is just more of this anti-colonial stuff. Let's go around and change all the names. But Agania Heights, the village name, regardless of its colonial origins, ties the current generation to more recent generations in history. The people of the current generation want to pass those connections, the connections to people and traditions they know, and remember and love to their future generations. The Commission is holding hearings to get village input on the proposed name changes. This is an opportunity that was not given to the residents when colonizers decided what villages would be called. Yeah, the colonizers decided. That's why we have a Chicago and a Los Angeles and a Denton. No.
Kenosha,
Guam, yeah.
Milwaukee,
yeah.
Hartford.
Now, if you were to stand and look at the names of all of the villages, except for Agana Heights and Santa Rita, Todadu Calling Tomorrow, Ania, Humatak, Humatic. You know, when people who speak a language attempt to speak a word from another language, they usually bend the word around their own phonology. So the word doesn't come out exactly the same. But I don't think the colonizers said, let's call this village over here Mauricio, because we have a Mauricio that's a suburb of Madrid back in Spain. I don't think that was it. The commission is holding hearings to get village input on the proposed name changes. This is an opportunity that was not given to residents when colonizers decided what villages would be called or where village boundaries would be. After explaining why the name change is considered, the commission has consistently heard from residents of this village that they don't want to change, not even with a hyphen, nor parenthesis. Of course, Kelly Marsh, Titano, is no longer in the legislature, so that's not an issue anymore. And it's not because they don't want the hassle of changing their letterheads, which I would be pretty concerned about, you know. If you have a business and you go about changing letterheads, business cards, and all that kind of stuff, it costs you money. Now, when I introduced a bill to change the name of Marine Drive to Marine Corps Drive, there was a section in the bill that said that both names could be used. I introduced the bill in 2004, and the section said that both names could be used until 2010, after which only Marine Corps Drive would be used. Let the guys use up their old stuff. The old letterhead, the old business cards, etc. But I think this is another one of those things where the agenda is what it's all about. It's important to the community of Agana Heights that they honor their history and traditions and their identity as they see fit. That's their call. The commission should honor it. And I agree 100%. You know, we use the word democracy all the time. Oh, you know, we have a democracy, or that's undemocratic. Well, when you stop and ask yourself, what does that word mean? Democracy, two Greek words that mean government by the people. And if the people in Agana Heights don't want to be called Tutuan, then to force Tutu on them is, believe it or not, undemocratic. Whoa. All right, so good editorial from the Daily News. The Post is still in something of a slump here. Resumption of full in-person learning is good for students and educators. You know, I'd have never thought of that in a million years, Jose.
You don't say.
Yeah. So, you know, this is the title of the editorial. Resumption of full in-person learning is good for students and educators. It takes them 3 pages to say that, when really all there is to say is what I just read. I'm not going to go any farther with it. Okay, it's that time of the day again. Here we go with the blue pencil. Not much suspense today. Once again, it's the Pacific Daily News. All you folks up there in Agana Heights, Tall Tales is supporting you, giving the blue star to the Pacific Daily News. That takes the Daily News up there up to 75 blue stars now.
You know, if you look at some of the titles, and I'm not sure about Agana Heights, but Mong Mong, parts of Mighty, if you look at the titles for property, they say the village of Sinahanya on it.
Yeah.
And do you know the history behind that? Is that because of, like, in the States, how they have townships?
Well, you know, we have what are called municipalities, and then we have what are called villages. And there really isn't much thought going into the process that the old the old maps, the old surveys went by the old municipalities. And then we came up with the village of Mong Mong Toto Mighty. I don't know what village Mong Mong Toto Mighty is in. I expect nobody else does either. So there's a real disconnect between villages and municipalities. And I used to understand exactly how this worked, but my foggy recollection is that the older maps, perhaps the newer maps too, go by municipal boundaries, not by village boundaries. So you could have someone who lives in the municipality, in the surveyed municipality of Sinahanya, who actually is a resident of the village of Agana Heights. That's my understanding.
Well, that's the truth for the village of Mong Mong. It is in the municipality of Sinahanya.
Mong Mong is.
Yeah, but the mayor won't come up and pick up my appliances. He already said he doesn't cover Mong Mong.
Yeah.
No, doesn't work.
Okay. Well, these things are important. Yeah. What kind of appliances are they, Jose?
I was just fishing. I have a couple of old water heaters to get picked up.
What's the matter? You don't have a pickup to get them out to the boonies?
I wasn't raised on Guam. I don't know about pickups.
You know, 1,000 years from now, archaeologists are going to discover all of these things of the earlier Guam civilizations, dead washing machines, expired couches, and they're going to draw all kinds of conclusions from these things. These people who lived here 1,000 years ago had machines, but obviously they didn't take very good care of them because they left them out in the boonies where they got all rusty.
Next to their cars.
Next to their dead cars, yeah. Okay, so much for Demi. Caught any too early for a break, Jose. Let's go to the card. I've got Ramos versus Investigations. I've got 80 Looters versus Nordstrom's. Turley versus the Media Cartel. More of the Left versus Rittenhouse. Turley versus Pencilneck. And I might finally get to Repeat versus Repeat. Kind of a thin card today. But I notice there's somebody knocking on the door of the green room. And let me accommodate another Joe here before I plunge into the card. He perhaps wants to say something. Do you want to say something about Tutuhan, another Joe?
Oh, I heard you were talking about Mong Mong Toto Mighty.
Uh-huh. Do you want to change the name of Mong Mong Toto Mighty to Tutuhan?
Oh, you're saying no? I don't think those are the old. I think Tutuhan is actually what Agana Heights area.
So you don't want to change Mong Mong Toto Mighty to Tutuhan, right?
I don't think it was an issue, was it?
Well, given that commission running around and changing all these names, you know, there was some stories in the paper like, well, what are they going to do when they get to Jonestown? Anyhow, you want to talk about Mong Mong Toto Mighty? Go ahead, another Joe.
Okay, Kebab. So back before the war, people had ranches. And so around the swamp area, Mong Mong Toto Mighty is along the swamp, right? So there was, I'm not sure where the old road was. I think it was more out, I'm not sure what that road is called that passes by what used to be NES, is the airport area. But there might have been trails, there might have been different accesses, but basically along that swamp area that feeds into I think it feeds into Agana Springs, or that wetland area, right all around Agana Shopping Center. And
I know where you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all the swamp area, and it gets fed by, there's the swamps going all the way up to Toltu, then to Mong Mong and that area. So, you know, our families had ranches in that area. So they would travel between, I guess, the Ganya area and to wherever their swamp was along the road. So, of course, after the occupation and they started building houses, they created the access road, the back road area. And so that's why it's an unusual village. It's actually 3 villages, to my understanding. And that's how, there's not many people residing there. There is more about going to, the families are living in the Ganya area, I think. And, because they didn't have any water lines. One of the first access water mains was put through that road, Clara Road, going into San Miguel Elementary School.
Okay.
So that's when some of our relatives were building more houses in that area, to my understanding. But there's a few, but most of it was just people going to their ranch areas, and not that many people. So I guess they wanted to, they wanted to have the same mayor for that entire area. They all knew each other due to ranching side by side, farming and ranching side by side. So that's the unusual nature of MTM, which reminds us of Kebab that we need green areas where we can grow our food. We need farmland areas. If we don't, we're going to be depending on shipping in our food, which is not sustainable. And then I'm really tempted to encourage people to go seek jobs stateside, because if we get it, there's all this rumor of being attacked by China. You got a huge population. How are you going to evacuate thousands, 100, 200,000 people when they couldn't even evacuate, was it 10, 15,000 before the Japanese occupation? So I'm a little bit wary of how we're going to feed ourselves and how we're going to save people if there's, God forbid, a war and we get attacked. But anyway, thanks, Kebab, for your time. No, I don't think they should keep changing the village names if the people of that village don't want to. I think they should just,
Maybe if somebody really wants to change the name of a village, we could just add the word "another" to the front of it. It worked for you, didn't it?
That's a nickname that you gave me, Kebab.
Oh, okay. Well, good talking to you.
Thanks for your time.
All
Thanks
right.
for your time, Kebab.
All right, so we'll take a break, and then we'll check with Elwin Champaco, who's kind of an expert. So we'll come back to that after this short break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So Elwin Champaco Quitino says this: no matter what Underwood says about village names, it's still his point of view, which in itself is a colonized point of view anyway. Wow. Tagging Underwood as a colonizer? Elwin goes on to say, all villages on Guam had Guan, G-U-A-N, Guan at the end as a suffix. Agana Heights is Tutuguan, water flowing on Guam. Sinahanya was Sineguanya, appendix of Guam. Maataguan River, which is now Mighty. Maateguan, yeah. And then, of course, there's Toto Sasa Toksha. Ask somebody to translate those words for you someday, Jose. And then we've got, let's see.
How about when people combine three names together and it becomes common usage sometimes? Like Tamuning, Tumon, and Harmon.
I never I never know where to put the emphasis, which syllable I should put the emphasis on. So is it tatuha, or tatuha? I don't know.
All three.
Anyone, whichever turns you on, huh? Now, the interesting thing is that Tamuning and Tumon, Tamuning, I think, is a municipality. Tumon is at least a village, right? Harmon is nothing. No. Yeah, Harmon is, there's an area that once upon a time was called Harmon Field. When I first got here, it was called Harmon Field. The runway was still there. All the parking aprons were there. There were no buildings down there at all. And all the young studs used to take their fast cars down there and drag race them. That was the purpose of Harmon Field. Nobody lived down there.
Was that named after somebody then?
Yeah, it was named after an Air Force officer.
See, I think that place was originally referred to as Finnegayan, and then the base moved, right? So to speak, the base moved, became NCS, and that area became known as Finnegayan.
Finnegadson?
Finnegadson, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, as far as Harmon was concerned, it was Harmon Field, and that's what it was. And for a long, long time, they only put a road on top of the runway maybe 15 years ago. Yeah. So that strip down there was the main highway from here to Tokyo back during the war.
They're still speeding on that road.
Exactly. And then if you know where to look, there are some old concrete foundations of buildings that were built around the Harmon Strip. Like out behind Dr. Miller's shop, there's a very large concrete slab. It's left over from the war. Now, there was also a housing area for Harmon Field that was out towards Two Lovers Point. That was known as Harmon Village. And up until probably the late 60s, houses left over from World War II were still used to house teachers. There were wood and screens, tin roofs, and those houses lasted forever. You know, the same house could last for 25 years, 3 new roofs, 4 new walls, 2 new front doors. You know, the termites made sure that you kept renewing them. But that was Harmon Village, and there must have been a couple hundred teachers living at Harmon Village. But what the folks in Tamuning call Harmon nowadays is not a village, it's not a municipality. It's only even been a place where there's commercial activity and people living for a relatively short period of time. And if it's within the boundaries of Tamuning, that's what it is. And of course, the boundary line between Dadido and Tamuning is Route 16. If you're north of Route 16, you're in Dadido. South of Route 16, you're in Tamuning. Or what the folks at the mayor's office nowadays call Tatuha, or Tatuha, or Tatuha. I don't know. Okay, back to the card. We've got first item on the card here is Ramos versus investigations. And this is not a very clear story, so I'll try to put it together as best I can. Board. Nurses allege coercion to alter records. Now, I said board, not commission, like Tomorrow Land Trust Commission, where this headline could have appeared at one time. Remember that? Yeah. A doctor at Guam Regional Medical City is said to have coerced nurses into changing records under the rationale of protecting a nurse after a catheter that was the wrong size was used during an operation. Limited details of the incident were discussed during the November 18 meeting of the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners, which is looking into a complaint on the change in documentation. Board member Gia Ramos is overseeing the case at the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners. She said she interviewed GRMC Senior Vice President and Chief Nursing Officer Jennifer Cruz. Ramos learned that the nurses heard the doctor order a size 12 catheter, but the doctor claimed to have ordered a size 13. Quote, they did proper procedures. They had the size 12 and another person double checks the size. I think there's 2 more people that double checks the size. So from the nurse's standpoint, they heard a size 12, and it was inserted to find out later it was the wrong size, Ramos said. The doctor became very upset, she added. I guess he went berserk and was yelling at them and got really upset and told them to alter the documents. To put on the notes that they gave the size 13, Ramos continued, because of the doctor being really upset and saying how, I guess one of the nurses is the main nurse. His argument is he wanted to protect the nurse, that she's going to get reported to the board. She's going to lose her license. So therefore, we need to help her we need to help her by changing the size in their documentation from 13 to 12. The nurses did not want to comply, but were afraid of the doctor and ultimately did change the documentation, Ramos said. As for the patient, Ramos said she understood there was no harm to him, but he was really sick and did end up having a bypass. Now I'm sitting here thinking about catheters and bypasses and...
Where did they insert the catheter?
Yeah, well, if it's what I think it is, and I know a little bit about, heart surgery myself, if you're talking about some kinds of heart surgery, the catheter is inserted in the crotch. Because there's a vein that can be followed from the crotch all the way to the heart. But my understanding is that a bypass operation is an open heart operation. They crack open the ribs, put the patient on a heart-lung machine, and start carving around on the arteries that way. But once again, I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. I told you why I couldn't go to medical school, Jose.
Because we can read your handwriting.
Yeah, my handwriting just wasn't bad enough to get in. So, hospital management learned of this case due to another issue, according to Ramos. The nurses did not come forward until 2 days after the alteration incident and have now been reprimanded and suspended, she said. The Post asked GRMC for a comment on the case, including whether the nurses will be returned to the hospital, whether management looked into the claims that the doctor coerced the nurses, and if any disciplinary action had been taken against him. The hospital has not commented. Their spokeswoman stated that it is GRMC policy not to comment on personnel matters. Well, at least she didn't come along with a GovGuam lie saying, we can't comment. We're we're prohibited from commenting on personnel. At least she was honest about it. The Post also asked about the current status of the patient, but was told that the hospital could not comment about private medical information due to HIPAA. Overall, GRMC had no comment at this time. Meanwhile, at the Guam Board of Nurse Examiners, Ramos asked how the board should handle the complaint, which was made because the nurses did alter the document. From the board conversation on November 18, it appears that there is one nurse who is the subject of the complaint. Ramos said she hadn't yet spoken to the nurse, although she had reached out. How do we handle these kinds of cases? I still need, of course, confirmation from the nurse who is accused. But they're the ones who came forward and told the doctor as to what had happened. They were kind of harassed and coerced into changing the document, and they did state they did alter the documents, Ramos said. The matter was tabled until Ramos could speak to the nurse, complete her investigation, and present a recommendation to the board. Well, I've got to put on my know-it-all hat here. This sounds like a very strange way of going about things. If you really are having an investigation, I would think that whatever questions you ask the person ought to be in front of this board, rather than Ramos asking the question and then coming back to the board and saying, well, this is what she said. I think it's really putting a nurse in an awkward position to be doing this kind of work without knowing anything about it. Maybe she's doing it right. But just last week we talked about hiring lawyers for these boards, and this is one of the boards. So if these boards are going to have disciplinary authority, they need a lawyer. And they don't, and to expect the board members to go out and do the investigation, I mean, how is a board member going to do the investigation and then come back and sit as a member of a tribunal that sits in judgment of the person who was investigated? It just doesn't work. So there's another good reason that these boards should hire lawyers and investigators and not run the risk of winding up in litigation with the costs, embarrassment, etc., that could involve. All right, next item on the card is 80 looters versus Nordstrom's. And this all ties into some of the stuff that's going on in our country right now. Cultural Marxism. Are we supposed to ignore what all the San Francisco looters have in common? Okay, I've got a story here. Two stories. I'm going to go to one first and then to the punchline. 80 looters simultaneously broke into a Nordstrom near San Francisco, police say. Clearly a planned event and weekend filled with looting incidents. Drivers blared their horns Saturday evening as dozens of thieves carrying luggage and bags darted from a Nordstrom department store near San Francisco and hopped into cars waiting for them outside. It seems to me that this happened at Walnut Creek. Is that right? Yeah. All but 3 of the 80 or so looters escaped, police said. 2 store employees were assaulted and one was pepper sprayed by the intruders, according to officers in Walnut Creek, a city about 25 miles east of San Francisco. In a news release, police called the crime clearly a planned event. Walnut Creek police investigators are in the process of reviewing surveillance footage to attempt to identify other suspects responsible for this brazen act. The spectacle Saturday night was one of several incidents of looting and shoplifting reported at high-end retail stores around the Bay Area over the weekend. I've reported earlier that the district attorneys for San Francisco County and L.A. County have come out publicly and said they're not going to prosecute minor shoplifting events. Up to something like $750, no prosecution.
900.
900.
It's even worse.
No prosecution. That's a good message to send to the honest people who don't shoplift anyhow.
That's like $100 away from grand larceny.
Yeah.
That might even be erased in San Francisco.
Could be. On Friday night, thieves broke into at least 10 stores, including a Louis Vuitton in San Francisco's Union Square. And on Saturday night, officers in Hayward, about a 30-minute drive from San Francisco, were investigating after a group of smash-and-grab burglars destroyed glass cabinets and stole merchandise from a mall jewelry store. I wish somebody would ask me that question again. Why does anybody need an assault rifle? Why are people carrying these AR-15s? These crimes are happening around the Bay and across the country. San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Bodine, he's one of the two. Chesa Bodine is the son of two 1960s terrorists. I stand in partnership with our local, regional, state, and federal partners as we work together to do whatever it takes to keep you safe, except prosecute shoplifters, Bodine said. Beep, beep. Incidents of retail theft and organized crime have marred San Francisco's image as of late. Pharmacies like Walgreens and CVS have bemoaned blatant act of shoplifting and shuttered several locations as a result. In September, city officials announced new tactics for fighting the crime wave, including adding more foot patrols and additional investigators to the police department's organized retail crime unit. I thought we were supposed to abolish the police, defund the police department. Who needs cops? This weekend's crime spree began Friday night around 8 as San Francisco police responded to reports of looting and burglary around Union Square, a popular shopping district. Videos circulating on social media showed looters ransacking Louis Vuitton after shattering the windows. One person can be seen climbing a shelving display to grab a handbag at the top, while another dragged a large piece of luggage outside. Yet another ran from the store with an armful of shoes and clothing. ABC News reported $1 million in merchandise was stolen from Union Square stores. One video shows police smashing the windows of a Mustang outside the store and forcibly removing a person from the vehicle. At a news conference Saturday, San Francisco Police Chief Bill Scott said the officers were confronting an armed individual inside the Mustang. As of Saturday, police had arrested 8 people and seized 2 vehicles thought to be connected to the crimes. I think the people that tried to do this and the people that did do this, it was concerted. There was no doubt in my mind that this was not unplanned. So that's the first story. Now let's just go back and confine ourselves to what happened at Nordstrom. And I've got an article here from an outfit called the Conservative Treehouse. And here's what the Conservative Treehouse says. Cultural Marxism. Are we supposed to ignore what all the San Francisco looters have in common, other than the fact that they're all thieves? Here it goes. Perhaps there is a rule book somewhere that says you must not point out that all of the San Francisco looters who hit Nordstrom and Louis Vuitton are black. There are hundreds of media reports talking about the brazen nature of the ongoing mob and rob situations. But no one seems to point out what they all have in common. All of the people doing the robbing are black. Here's an example of CBS outlining a massive mob and rob on Nordstrom just outside of San Francisco. And there's a video, obviously, we can't show. Just before 9 p.m., dozens of cars pulled up to 1200 Broadway Plaza to block off the street and rush into the store. The cars did it. Dozens of random... This is a media report. This is how the media reports it. Dozens of random cars just pulled up to the store and began robbing the place. It might sound crazy, but that's exactly how NBC reporter and eyewitness Jody Hernandez described the incident when she initially tweeted out the alarm as she watched. Here's what she says. About 25 cars just blocked the street and rushed into Walnut Creek Nordstrom, making off with goods before getting in cars and speeding away. 25 cars blocked the street, rushed the store and stole stuff, then got into cars. You know what? I'll bet you Elon Musk has got something to do with it. Him and his electric cars and his self-driving cars.
Assault tires.
Yeah, that'll be the next thing, teaching cars how to rob stores, right? So the cars were in cahoots with more cars. All of this effort to twist language is intended to do what? Avoid noticing that all the robbers are black. This is silly. Walnut Creek police investigators are in the process of reviewing surveillance footage to identify other suspects responsible for this brazen act, the department said in Sunday's statement. Nordstrom reopened as usual on Sunday. This must be economic justice or something. The video from Louis Vuitton. There's a video from Louis Vuitton also. So there you go. I mean, this just never stops. Not that we're supposed to draw any conclusion that all of the burglars, all of the thieves are black, but it's an important fact. If you wanted to identify any of the people that were involved, might you want to know whether they were black or white or people of color or whatever? Okay, I've got Dr. Ron McNinch in the green room. We'll take a short break and come back to Dr. Ron McNinch.
Hey, let's go to Tango Theaters and watch a movie.
No way, I'm broke. How am I gonna buy snacks?
They have a combo special for the whole month of November called the G's for Giving Combo Specials. You can choose from 2 combos for just $13.75. G Combo 1 with a drink, popcorn, and candy, or G Combo 2 with a drink, hot dog, and chips.
Wow, okay, that sounds good.
A portion of the proceeds will be donated to the UOG Endowment Foundations for scholarships and programs.
Cool, it'll be my treat. I'll buy 2 combos.
Visit Tango Theaters and grab yourself a G Combo special during the whole month of November.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, coming back here, we just left Nordstrom's in San Francisco where several cars were burglarizing the stores. So, Ron, what do you think about those cars that burglarized a store in San Francisco? I think it must be Elon Musk in there somewhere.
Half a day, Cinder, half a day, Guam. Yeah, I have to tell you that particular technique, that swarm shoplifting technique, is actually a very old technique used by organized shoplifters. I think the difference now is they have like these Snapchat social media organization things going on where they're almost doing like a flash mob kind of shoplifting effort. They kind of all coalesce and come together. and basically rip people off. Mainly is the point that you really mentioned is they're simply not prosecuting people. And when you don't prosecute people who do these kinds of crimes, and quite often shoplifting is a serial crime. It's something that people do over and over and over again. And there are whole rings of shoplifters in the U.S. mainland that prey upon, all kinds of goods like this on a regular basis. It's just they've never been able to thrive in this kind of environment before, where simply that the entire criminal justice system has defaulted on its role to enforce basic laws. I really believe if a smart citizen could go after these prosecutors on 42 U.S.C. 1983 charges under color of law because they're not protecting the community by doing their jobs. I think that there's an important aspect to that. There is one other quick thing I was going to mention about Rittenhouse. Of course, all three of the people he shot were white, but even more so, all three had long criminal records. And they were brazen. They had no fear of, some kid with a gun, and they had no fear of running in. And apparently the first person that Rittenhouse shot had been threatening everybody within earshot constantly. In fact, that whole night, and he'd threatened Rittenhouse and his friends earlier that night. Then he rushed them and basically tried to take his gun away. I have to tell you, where I'm from or where I grew up in the U.S. mainland, you would never see, ever, this kind of behavior. Ever. People just don't, average citizens just don't put up with it. It's unusual some kid, goes and wants to defend a parking lot. No, it's like everybody where I grew up would do that kind of thing. It's just incredible, the difference in
I kind of lost you at the end there, Ron. We lost the connection too. Ron, if you're still listening, I do want to make one. I do want to mention one legal point, and that is that there's a landmark case, a very broad landmark case called DeShaney versus Winnebago County, that holds that the police don't have a duty to citizens under any circumstance unless the citizen is in custody. So the fact that the cops are not... are you back, Ron?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just talking about DeShaney versus Winnebago County. It's an older case.
Great case.
Yeah, and it holds that cops don't have a general duty to the general public to protect them unless a member of the public happens to be in custody. So I think you'd have a hard time going forward with a case against the cops or district attorneys for not doing their jobs.
Yeah, I'm going to think about it some more. There has to be some way to make district attorneys do their job. To me, this is a district attorney's issue. That is, when the district attorney says, we're not going to prosecute, that's just a total default. That's not right.
Chesa Boudin. Google Chesa Boudin. He's quite a guy. Gotta go, Ron. Halftime. Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll be back right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
It was intentional. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The carnage inflicted on Sunday's Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin, by a driver who raced through it, killing 5 people, according to one witness.
It was fully intentional. He was trying to go around all the floats and everything, and that's how he got so close to us.
Thomas Kluka says he and his family barely avoided being hit.
Subject was taken into custody a short distance from the scene, and we are confident he acted alone.
There's no evidence that this is a terrorist incident.
That's Waukesha's Police Chief Daniel Thompson, who says 39-year-old Darrell Brooks Jr. will be charged with 5 counts of intentional homicide, plus other charges for the 48 people hurt, among them 2 children still listed in critical condition. In an exclusive interview with Fox's Tucker Carlson, Kyle Rittenhouse explaining what happened the night he fired and shot 3 people during riots in Kenosha, Wisconsin last summer.
Rittenhouse giving his personal insight into the night in question, as some members of the media and some in politics called the verdict a miscarriage of justice.
I said I had to do it. I was just attacked. I was dizzy. I was vomiting. I couldn't breathe.
Rittenhouse adding that if he was convicted, no one would ever be privileged to defend themselves against attackers.
Fox's Laura Ingle. Rittenhouse says he believes he was defamed by President Biden and by others who called him a white supremacist. He also says his first team of attorneys used him to promote a movement, allowing him to sit in jail for 87 days, much of the time, he says, when bail money was available. Closing arguments are scheduled to conclude Tuesday in the trial of 3 men charged with killing Ahmaud Arbery during last summer in Brunswick, Georgia. The Justice Department confirms an out-of-court settlement has been reached with the families of all but one of the victims of the Florida high school massacre. They had sued the FBI, charging the Bureau knew Nicholas Cruz planned to attack the school but didn't act. America is listening to Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to nectac, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
As we celebrate this holiday season, we reflect on the hardships of the past 2 years and remain grateful for the family and friends who share our journey and lighten our burdens. The team at Security Title is proud of the work we do to support ourselves and our families, to serve and care for our customers, and to give back to our community. May this season of joy and the new year bring happiness, good health, and prosperity to you and yours. Merry Christmas from all of us at Security Title.
Democrat California Congressman Ro Khanna urging the White House to do something about fuel prices.
There is no doubt that prices are up. Prices of gas are up. Prices of food are up. People are hurting. Here's what we need to do. We need to release the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We need to have a temporary ban on the export of oil so we can bring gas prices down.
Bloomberg reports the president will order some supplies released from the country's Strategic Petroleum Reserve as early as tomorrow, but
sources at the White House tell Fox News that no decision has been made, at least not yet. They also concede that conversations are ongoing, and they say they're considering a range of tools for if and when action is needed.
Fox's Kevin Corke in Washington. The president announcing Monday he wants the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board to stay on.
President Biden says stability is needed as the U.S. economy recovers from the coronavirus pandemic.
When our country was hemorrhaging jobs last year and there was panic in our financial markets, Jay's steady and decisive leadership helped to stabilize markets.
That's why the president says he is nominating Jerome Powell for a second four-year term as chairman of the Federal Reserve. Many progressives had lobbied for a change and advocated Lael Brainerd, a Democrat on the Board of Governors. President Biden has nominated her for the number 2 spot, vice chair. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
There's word from police in New York City that Malik Shabazz, the daughter of assassinated civil rights leader Malcolm X, has been found dead in her Manhattan apartment. A bus crash in northern Bulgaria has killed at least 45 people, according to a Bulgarian news agency, children among them. The Sri Lankan Navy reports a ferry has capsized in the eastern part of Sri Lanka, killing at least 6 people. A dozen others have been rescued, but it's not immediately clear how many people were aboard that vessel. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Howdy, Chili's is serving y'all some Texas-sized family meal, because everything's bigger in Texas. Enjoy full racks of Chili's world-famous baby back ribs, margarita chicken, savory shrimp, beef fajita, smoked jalapeno sausages, mashed potatoes, and corn on the cob. Man, this meal's bigger than Dallas, but it ain't breaking the bank. Chili's has Texas-sized family meals for just $45 to feed your crew of 3 to 6 folks. For your youngins, just add $5 for a kid's meal. Chili's, more life, and bigger meals happen here.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Santa's coming and things are looking up. Bank Pacific has rolled out Rudolph's favorite My Christmas loan with an annual percentage interest rate as low as 3.99% and up to $50,000. And with the new Bank Pacific contactless Visa debit card, you can have the flexibility of using your money when you want to, where you want to. My Christmas Loan contactless Visa debit card. Let's make Christmas merrier this year. Equal opportunity lender. Credit conditions apply. Merry Christmas from Bank Pacific.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
So here we are after that big halftime show that we all like so much and we've learned to love, actually, probably the best halftime show anywhere in the United States. And during the halftime show, I took a peek at Wikipedia on Chesa Boudin. Quite a guy. And I'll just give you some of the highlights here. He was born on August 21, 1980. And his early life, Boudin was born in New York City. His parents, Kathy Boudin and David Gilbert, were Weather Underground members. When Boudin was 14 months old, both were arrested and convicted of murder for their role as getaway car drivers in the Brinks robbery of the 1981 in Rockland County, New York. Boudin's mother was sentenced to 20 years to life and his father to 75 years to life for the felony murders of 2 cops and a security guard. After his parents were incarcerated, Boudin was raised in Chicago by adoptive parents Bill Ayers.
Sounds familiar.
Uh-huh.
Sounds very familiar.
Barack Obama's right-hand man, and Bernadette Dorn, who was a fugitive for like 25 years, who, like his parents, had been members of the Weather Underground. Boudin reports that he did not learn to read until age 9. Kathy Boudin was released on parole supervision in 2003. And then there's a paragraph here. Boudin descends from a long left-wing lineage, and it takes it off. And if you go to this Wikipedia article, it goes into some of the things that he's done as a San Francisco DA, like decarceration, as an example, letting people out of jail, and so on. So he's way over hard on the left, and I suspect that, you know, that there may have been a sense of enablement amongst the 80 who did the 80 cars that did the stealing, with a district attorney that's not going to, wouldn't prosecute them anyhow. So you might, this is not homework, but just for kicks, go to get on your computer and go to Chesa Boudin Wikipedia, Chesa Boudin, Chesa Boudin. And we had somebody who asked about online here about talking about place names, asked about Agafagumos. And I got something here on that too, if I can find it. Just give me a second here. Yeah, Agafagumos stands for Army Garrison Force, as you were, Army Garrison Force. So AGAFA is an acronym, Army Garrison Force. It started out as AGAFO and morphed into AGAFA. And Polly Eric has got an article here and online that you can read, Polly Eric. And he said there was a commander at Anderson who lived in an Air Force housing, which is where Agafagumos was. It was Air Force housing on the other side of Route 9. And he came up with the name, which once again is an acronym standing for Army Garrison Force. And then he tried to go a little Chamorro, and he figured, well, if you got houses in there and the Chamorro word is Guma, then if you got more than one house, it's obviously Gumas. So that's how it got to be Agafagumos. Of course, that's not the way Chamorro works, but anyhow, now you know the rest of the story about Agafagumos. I suppose Robert Underwood and Hope Crisobel will change the name of that too. Maybe change it to Anderson Housing. Take it back to its roots. Next item on the card. You know, the Rittenhouse trial has got everyone talking about the corruption of the media cartel. It's so hard, unless you actually watch the trial on TV, it's so hard to find out what actually happened. Here's the standard narrative. Yeah, this thug, this white supremacist lived down in Illinois. He crossed state lines with an AR-15 to go into the heart of the the heart of the peaceful demonstration. And he shot two people he shot three people and killed two of them once he got there. That's kind of the number one narrative.
And it was a Black Lives Matter protest, so they were people of color.
Absolutely. Yeah. But what really happened is this. What's going on here is that there was a protest, which was a riot, turned into a riot. I'll never get over the CNN newscast where a CNN newscaster standing there with a microphone and a burning building behind him saying it's a mostly peaceful demonstration. So it was a very ruinous riot in Kenosha. A lot of buildings were burned, a lot of property was destroyed, several $1 million worth of damage. And Rittenhouse lived in Antioch, Illinois with his mother, but his father, who was divorced from his mother, lived in Kenosha. Rittenhouse lived in Kenosha. Rittenhouse worked in Kenosha. Rittenhouse was in Kenosha the day of the shooting. Rittenhouse's friend had bought a AR-15 style rifle and kept it for him in Wisconsin. Rittenhouse was carrying the rifle that night, and under Wisconsin law, it was legal for him to do that. Rittenhouse went before 12 men, good and true, and they found that he was not guilty of any crimes. And his defense was one of self-defense. Well, of course, if you're on the left, the only good jury verdict is one that comes down in favor of the left. everybody involved here was white, so you think it would be hard to come back with a racist narrative here if you're Black Lives Matter. But here's the kick. Here's the thing. The demonstration was a Black Lives Matter demonstration, demonstrating because a police officer had shot a cop. That's all it takes. You don't need to know anything more than that. There's only one place that a good person can be, demonstrating along with Black Lives Matter. If you're not, doesn't make any difference what you're doing, why you're there, what you're trying to do, whether your heart is pure or not, you're a bad person. And of course, the left can't stand a bad person, so they wanted a guilty verdict so bad here, not because of what Rittenhouse did, but because of Rittenhouse was. So my friend John Turley here Jonathan Turley writes a pretty good column, as is his usual custom. He says, the full acquittal of Kyle Rittenhouse is in now. The result was hardly a surprise to many of us who watched the trial rather than media coverage. The jury spent days carefully considering the evidence and could not find a single count that was supported beyond a reasonable doubt. In rendering the verdict, the jury fulfilled its core function in our legal system. The jury was designed to protect an individual from becoming the grist of a criminal justice system. As the Supreme Court noted in Duncan versus Louisiana, providing an accused with the right to be tried by a jury of his peers gave him an inestimable safeguard against the corrupt or overzealous prosecutor and against the compliant, biased, or eccentric judge. The American jury is designed to stand between the mob and a defendant, between the government and the accused. The thin line of a dozen citizens can prove the most unassailable wall for justice in our system. There was, however, a second verdict in that courtroom for those who have been maintaining a distorted or incomplete account to this trial. From the outset, politicians and media figures, he doesn't want to say Democrats. It's kind of like what went down in Walnut Creek. Nobody wanted to tell you what the folks were like. From the outset, politicians and media figures insisted that this was a case of murders committed by a white supremacist. Then presidential candidate Joe Biden labeled Rittenhouse a white supremacist in a tweet showing his photo, and demanded to know why then President Donald Trump did not disavow white supremacists. Much of the media followed suit with an echo chamber of coverage that led some people to believe that those were essentially executions on the streets of Kenosha. Columnist Ellie Mistel called the trial a sham. The pressure clearly had an impact on the prosecution, which overcharged Rittenhouse, including with a count that was invalid. The case began to fall apart as the prosecution called witnesses who contradicted the core elements of these charges. What happened next was even more chilling. Faced with a collapsing case in court, many of the same media outlets struck out at the judge, the jury, and the legal system. MSNBC host Tiffany Cross advocated for the judge's removal. Rittenhouse was mocked for his male white tears on national TV. Georgetown professor Paul Butler called the trial white privilege on steroids. The danger of such reckless legal analysis is now evident. Judging from the coverage, one could have easily concluded that a conviction in this case was inescapable. Many reports prioritized still pictures of Rittenhouse walking menacingly with his rifle and omitted many of the countervailing facts that occupied much of the trial. Many viewers may not have learned that Rittenhouse spent his time cleaning graffiti off the high school. The prosecutor argued that Rittenhouse provoked his first victim, 36-year-old Joseph Rosenbaum. Videotapes show the opposite, that Rosenbaum clearly pursued Rittenhouse. Casual trial observers would be unaware that Rosenbaum was convicted sex offender who witnesses described as threatening to kill Rittenhouse. Most people seem to disagree with the decision of Rittenhouse and others to show up at protests armed. However, many also perceive the alleged victims as rioters who were engaged in violent acts, including attacks on Rittenhouse. In our siloed society, people rely on news sources that tend to confirm their bias and presuppositions in such trials. The problem is that such coverage is self-fulfilling. By misrepresenting and not reporting key facts, media increase the likelihood that the acquittal will be read as a confirmation of a racist trial and a racist justice system. That fuels the type of rioting we saw in Kenosha after the shooting of Jacob Blake in a scuffling with police. Ironically, that case was also widely misrepresented in much of the media. The Blake case was the subject of both state and federal investigations that rejected charges against the officer. Yet the inaccurate coverage of that case continued to enrage viewers who were not fully informed of the facts leading up to the use of force. The various investigations found that the officers were required to arrest Blake on charges of third-degree sexual assault, criminal trespass, and disorderly conduct. 2 different officers used a taser on Blake, which failed. Investigations also found that Blake was armed and resisting arrest. The growing disconnect between actual crimes and their coverage is unlikely to change in our age of rage. Rittenhouse had to be convicted to fulfill the narrative, and any acquittal had to be evidence of a racist jury picked to carry out racist justice, either one way or the other. Either Rittenhouse is convicted as a racist or the trial was bad because it was a racist cover-up. That's what occurred in the Rittenhouse trial. The jury stood between a mob and a defendant to see that the objective justice was done. We talked about objective justice the other day. On that chaotic night of August 25, 2020, in Kenosha, a few things were clear. What is clear, however, is that the shooting and those killed and accused became vehicles for broader narratives. Those popular portrayals crashed in Kenosha on a wall of 12 jurors who ruled by proof rather than passion. Yeah, amen, Jonathan. Very good. Okay, just about time for the 7th inning stretch. I've got Senator Chris Duenas and William. And Senator Chris wants to talk about those crazy lefties, and William wants to talk about Rittenhouse. So let's head for Wrigley, and then we'll come back to Senator Chris Duenas and William after Wrigley Field.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Afre, my name is Kiona Rivera, student at the University of Guam and recent recipient of the G is for Giving Scholarship. This holiday season, I'm encouraging our island community to support the G is for Giving campaign. Your generous contribution not only support programs at the university, but also helps students like me reach our academic goals. For more information on how you can help shape the future leaders of our island, call the UOG Endowment Foundation at 671-735-2957 or visit their website at give.uog.edu.
Okay, so here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago for the 7th inning stretch. I hope everybody out there in our international radio listening audience of tailgaters had a chance to stretch. We go next to, let's see, I've got, let me see who's on line one. It is none other than Senator Chris Duenas. Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm a Marine senator and my favorite talk show host. You know, Jonathan Turley is now a Fox News contributor, and what a treat when I get to catch some of the broadcasts with the different anchors. Always love hearing that guy's perspective. Sharp individual.
And objective. You know, he doesn't try to fababa you when he's telling these stories. He's balanced, objective, fair, accurate. He's a good man.
Exactly. I love that analysis. I mean, even first of all, you know, the last time we talked, the current result of the Rittenhouse trial was something we were praying for and something that we saw was what would be justice should he be acquitted. And, you know, thank God that was the end result. But even his analysis when other anchors ask him, you know, where should Rittenhouse go from here in terms of suing for, you know, slander and defamation and all these things. He just lays it out straight, you know, saying that you know, this is the way it looks, particularly if you were to go, you know, and discuss about Let's Go Brandon or down the line with regard to the different talk shows. And he doesn't say he doesn't have a case, but he's very analytical and very fair in terms of, you know, what the possibilities are and what all that entails. And I just really love the way he, you know, he handles himself and the straightforwardness and, like you said, the fair, balanced position that he takes. But I called basically because, you know, with all of your history, you know, given God's good grace to give you the years that you've had, and just watching the political process over the years and understanding the left and the right. Now the ultra crazy left, as we talk about it, it almost seems like every time we think something's unbelievable, you know, something else unbelievable happens. You know, prayers to those 5 who died in Wisconsin as well by that lunatic who, you know, a long time criminal history and everything else, released on $1,000 bond that just basically mowed over a bunch of people, an absolute animal as far as I'm concerned. But, you know, time and time again, you know, we're seeing that, and it's being so exposed, particularly in San Francisco, other areas, these DAs and all these individuals that are supported by a very, very super crazy lefty machine, probably with a large architecture in terms of what the end goal is. But when I look at these individuals that you know, that take that money and go for the power of those positions and are controlled, and they carry out the mission of decriminalizing so much stuff, letting people out, trying to open the gates of the prison and just let everybody out. I mean, it's just so insane. And they're not concerned for their personal safety. I wonder sometimes, Bob, do you think that any of these people honestly believe in what they're doing, or are they just complete useful idiots?
You know, I think probably a lot of them have OD'd on Kool-Aid, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like a Chesa Boudin, you know, given his upbringing and things like that. I suspect that, you know, his mother never fed him milk when he was a baby. It was probably always Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm. The reason why I go down this road is because I remember, and I think our Carl and others have talked about this before. To me, sort of when I was a youngin', which, you know, was, you know, you were young in a much longer time than I was, but I'm still not a spring chicken. When I was a kid, and I remember when I was going to school in Michigan, where my mom's from, Granville High, and I remember we had a small prayer group. And my sophomore year, the school, it was kind of interesting. Public school, we fought hard against it, but there was a lot of movement, and you could just feel it. That's when I first understood really the left and the right, where they started not allowing us to assemble and do our prayer group in school, either to come in early in our homeroom and whatever else, and at least a half hour early. And so we had to start going to different people's houses to, have Bible study and prayer group and the like. And so I just watched this erosion over the years to where it's gotten so nuts. But it's when people who basically were like, well, why do you got to do that here? Just you don't have to have prayer group here or whatever else. You want to do that, go do it somewhere else. I mean, it was a time when I felt that I could feel what the pushback against conservatism was. But I never felt as though I knew we were right in doing what we were doing, but I never felt as though it was fanatical. You know what I mean? It made sense. Conservatism makes sense on so many levels, in terms of how you manage your finances, how you all throughout your life in what you do. The reason why I have such a hard time, not necessarily with left, I understand the differences in points of view, but with far left, none of it makes any sense, and that's why I try to, maybe I'm just an exercise in futility, but I wonder really how we've gotten to the point to where people accept this and we're getting wired this way. It's really unsettling.
Well, it's I've got a saying here from Abraham Lincoln that I'll break out again. This is what Abraham Lincoln said: "With public sentiment, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. Consequently, he who molds public sentiment goes deeper than he who enacts statutes or pronounces decisions. He makes statutes and decisions possible or impossible to be executed." So, we'd like to think in terms of people who mold public opinion are molding it in the right direction. But a lot of folks have figured out how to go about molding public opinion, and they take it in the wrong direction. I gave you as an example Herman and Henry entering into a relationship that they call a marriage. I don't call it a marriage. And there are people around now who say, "Oh, I just heard hate speech. This guy on the radio said that a marriage is one man and one woman. That's hate speech. I don't know if he could be locked up for that, but if he could, he should be." So 20 years ago or so, if a person ran for office and said, "I want to change the law so that Herman could get married to Henry," he wouldn't have been able to get to be elected assistant dog catcher of Malolo. Mm-hmm. But I could, sometime I could point to a couple of books that show you how the public relations onslaught started working in right around the beginning of the 90s, and how it was able to mold public opinion to the point where the idea of Herman marrying Henry it came within the ambit of the Overton window. Do you understand the Overton window, or should I explain that, Chris?
I've heard you explain it before, but I think I'd like to hear it again.
Yeah, well, the Overton window is, if you can imagine a chunk of wood with a window in the middle of it, issues that are, when you move that board across the issues, if something is within the Overton window, it means a politician can advocate it and not run the risk of not being reelected. Mm-hmm. So, say in 1990, the Overton window wouldn't have been close to Herman with the same-sex marriage. Anybody who would advocate same-sex marriage wouldn't have had a chance. And the Overton window gradually moved forward. Massachusetts is the only state that ever voted for same-sex marriage. All the other places, it came in on judicial coattails. But as time went on, the public relations aspect became more and more persuasive. more and more people caved in, and as people around you start adopting an idea, it becomes much harder for you not to. If you're a conservative, you know what I'm talking about, Chris.
Right.
So that's what happened. Various interest groups figured out how to mold public opinion. We used to have the Fourth Estate that was sort of a benchmark that made it more difficult for those molders to do their job. But now the Fourth Estate has signed up with the left, made it much easier to bring about these rather radical departures from the way we used to do things.
Sure. Well, I guess in closing, Virginia, the closeness of New Jersey, and other races around the nation, I guess the keeping the faith, but the conservatives definitely have to step up and push extremely hard at this point, because the crazy left is just something that is intolerable and unsustainable. So I can deal with a difference of opinion, but to think, to basically think that we end up just celebrating lawlessness and not care about consequences or safety and security, that's a bridge too far for me. So we got a lot of work to do, and I'll do my best.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep doing it here in the afternoon between 4 and 6 every day. You can bet on that, Chris.
Right on, Bob. Always appreciate it. Take care, my friend.
Good talking to you, Chris. Okay, so we got a little time here before it's time to head for Churchill Downs. So, William, let's chat on our way to Churchill Downs. Okay.
Sounds good to me. I like Churchill Downs. I've been there a couple times. Pretty neat place.
All right. Well, we get there about 10 minutes to 6 every day for the home stretch of Tall Tales.
Okay. Well, going back on to the left versus Rittenhouse, looking back at the events of what's happened in the last couple days since the verdict, which has been a very what's the word I want to use? Dynamic situation, especially with the left versus, conservatism, in my opinion, or just law-abiding citizens. It's almost like the left represents criminals and the right represents law-abiding citizens. So going back to the Rittenhouse case, here we are. We have an acquittal. And the leftist media gets on a rampage, which they are on. And I did watch The View, and I watched a couple other leftist shows here in the last couple of days just to see what they were saying. And they have been going ballistic on their propaganda, and and it's affecting people. I've talked to people that are actually friends of mine that are listening to it and believe it, and that don't believe that he didn't cross state lines. They think he did. And everything else that goes along with that propaganda, and they want to have blood. They want the left wants blood, and that was their goal. And they have, and because the left has an intrinsic value of criminalization and breaking the law in their mainstream group of people that support them. I think that it's almost like a large machine that has multiple parts that work at different speeds and times, and I think they knew that at some point someone was going to snap, someone was going to develop a sense of rage and anger and not have control over it because they have a criminal mind and act upon it. And and these problems are very intrinsic, especially there in that Wisconsin area. You've got a prosecutor, John Chisholm, the prosecutor there in Waukesha County? If I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, we have special ways of pronouncing things in Wisconsin. As an example, R-I-O, you'd think it'd be Rio, Rio. B-E-R-L-I-N, you'd think it'd be Berlin, it's Berlin. So the town you're talking about is Waukesha. Mm-hmm.
Which is there's a county there as well.
Right.
And that prosecutor, John Chisholm, he's a stout Democrat leftist, and has there's a big trail of damage that he's done in that area, especially with bond reform and basically not putting criminals in jail. Not to mention, the other issues that are going on in that area. But at any rate, here we are with Darrell Brooks, who is released from prison when he shouldn't have been, which is obvious, and he's listening to this leftist media. It's been proven already, the facts that he's a BLM supporter. He's got multiple digital medium footprints that are being erased, by the way. They are disappearing, that support that he had political intention, political motives, and had a motive for wanting to hurt white people or any person that was a conservative-minded individual. And he acts upon that. And the evidence is there because he was in a domestic dispute where he left the scene before the police arrived. The police did not pursue him. And this individual, if you're running from the police, everyone knows there's police at a parade. Why would you go, if you're running from the police, towards an area where it's obvious that you can see the flashing lights, you can see the barricades, you can see the people that are there? You don't want to go there. You want to get away from them because you're a criminal and you just committed a crime and you want to get away and be free still. But that's not what he did. He did the opposite. He went towards the flashing lights. He went towards the crowd of people. He went towards where all the police were. And why? Why did he do that? And I think this is where motive comes in for this whole act. And it's a mindset that has been put into this individual by our leftist media that are very aggressive and very wrong and criminal in their actions on this propaganda that they're pushing out into the American public. And here we have an individual that has a political motive because there's a social footprint. There's evidence of him with him saying things towards the right and the Black Lives Matter movement initiative and his hate that he has towards law-abiding citizens. He's just committed a crime. He leaves the scene. He drives to a parade. He then, according to bystanders, which I've heard them speak on live TV and on the internet, saying he was on a mission. He was on purpose. He was avoiding vehicles. He was avoiding things, and he was on purposely running people over.
You know what, William? If it turns out that there is credible proof that that's exactly what happened, who's really going to benefit from all this? It'll be chiropractors, because the leftist mainstream media will twist itself into such pretzel shapes that they won't be able to get out of bed without the help of a chiropractor.
This is all connected, and this is all connected, and this is a terrorist act. And the chief of police, Dan Thompson, should be ashamed of himself, who's also a Black Lives Matter motivator. There's too many Democrats in power there in that area of Wisconsin. Yeah. He jumped up and said, "This is not a terrorist act," before any investigation was done whatsoever. Well, if I'm not mistaken, domestic terrorism is a terrorist act. And that is exactly what just occurred today in that poor village.
Yeah, but wait a minute. This guy never went to a school board meeting, so it couldn't be domestic terrorism, could it, if he never went to a school board meeting?
Yeah. That was what got mowed down, was the domestic terrorists. That's who was in the parade. The parents of the children, they were the domestic terrorists.
They're the ones that go to these school board meetings, right?
Right, exactly. So here you have domestic terrorism occurring, and the chief of police immediately denies that this is a terrorist act, and wants to and they all just want to suppress the reality of what the situation is. And the situation is that you have a leftist terrorist group and a leftist terrorist motivation that is nationwide, that is endemic. That's the pandemic that we're having right now.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, William.
Thank you.
Good talking.
Thanks for listening and letting me speak.
Good talking to you, William. How are things in Salt Lake City today?
Cold, and there's snow in the mountains, and it's cold. I think it's in the mornings it's like 20 degrees, and we might get to 45 in the afternoon. But I love it. I love all weather. So I love the best of all, at areas wherever you go to. So, and this is a beautiful place. People, if nobody's ever been here to Utah, you got to go. This is an absolutely gorgeous place.
I agree. I do. I really agree. Okay, well, thanks again, William, and give us a buzz next week, okay?
Yes, sir.
Talk to you later. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs, and coming out of Churchill Downs, fasten your seatbelts, because we're going to be dealing with the most dangerous man in the room.
Come by Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
So here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch for another day. And as I stagger or stumble around Churchill Downs, who do I encounter? None other than the most dangerous man in Kentucky. Good afternoon, Carl.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Enjoying your show very much. I just wanted to chime in because of one comment that Senator Duenas mentioned. He said he was talking about how irrational what is going on seems to be, and I had that attitude for quite a while, and it's part of it still exists. Where I can't believe that they're actually doing this. But the more I consider and the more I read, the more I think it makes total sense. One of the books that I'm working my way toward is by Mark Levin. It's called Ameritopia. And I'll read a couple of sentences at the chapter 1. It says, political utopianism is tyranny disguised as desirable, workable, and even paradisical governing ideology. There are, of course, unlimited utopian constructs, for the mind is capable of infinite fantasies. But there are common themes. The fantasies take the form of grand social plans or experiments, the impracticability or impossibility of which, in small ways or large, lead to the individual's subjugation. So I think what we're witnessing, and Marx talked about in his Communist Manifesto, he listed all the things that must be done in order to destroy, as he said, the overthrow all existing conditions. That's a quote. Including religion, the family, personal possessions or private property, freedom, democracy, and on and on. In order to establish utopia, whatever it is, Chinese Marxism, American Marxism, moral Marxism, which I can guarantee there is. I can guarantee it exists, and on and on. There's just countless offshoots of Marxism. In order to establish that, you have to destroy what exists. And one of the things that Lenin did in the lead up to and during the Bolshevik Revolution, which killed over 6 million men, women, and children, was releasing prisoners from prison. out into the population to drive chaos. I think you mentioned one time something you're supposed to have said, the worse the better.
Mm-hmm. The
In
worst
order to
things
have
hit,
people
yeah.
just crave, whatever it takes, just make this insanity stop. So I believe it makes complete sense what they're doing. They are on the road to utopia. And creating chaos is just one leverage point or tool to destroy capitalist America. And when that is done, they will commence creating socialist-communist America. And I think we're somewhere on that spectrum of destruction and establishment of what they see as this utopian vision, this American Marxist vision of a beautiful world, and a social justice world. And their primary enemy is capitalism, especially American capitalism, because it's so successful. So they must destroy it, they must demonize it, they must do everything they can to drive it into the ground. And that is what we're seeing. So anyway, that's my take on it. The more I read, the more this craziness, this insanity makes complete sense. They're in the process of destroying capitalist America.
Well, especially, Carl, if you understand the mind or the orientation of the communist. Now, when I'm talking about communist, I'm not talking about someone who says, yeah, I read some books about it, I really like it, and I'm for it. I'm talking about people like the members of the CPUSA, Communist Party USA. And their approach is that the bourgeoisie are so powerful and so strong, and the workers are so undermanned that ordinary concepts of decency, morality, legality have to be cast aside in order to bring about this communist utopia. So when you're in a certain position on the left, you can toss all scruples aside. Look what's happening to our newspapers, where you have deans of journalism schools coming out and saying, hey, forget about this both sidesism. That's not the way to do it. You've got a story. You got to get out there and tell the story. You know what's right. You know what's wrong. That's the way you write your stories. Because they're so convinced by the members of this communist philosophy that they can cast aside what they used to think was really important, was almost sacred, the objectivity of the mainstream media. And that's where we are now, where you can't look to any quarter for the way things ought to be fair, because that's not the way we do things anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think what we're seeing also drives home why one academic labeled Antonio Gramsci the most dangerous socialist in history.
Really?
Because socialism, or Marxism, communism, was actually headed downhill. Yeah, they were having a crisis of identity, because a lot of things were coming out about the crimes done in the Soviet Union, which were long denied as CIA conspiracy theories, and then it started to come out from the horse's mouth. I mean, speeches were starting to come out about the murder of tens of millions of people, and they were really going through a crisis. And what evolved out of that was neo-Marxism, and I believe Antonio Gramsci was the driving force behind that, and I think he's a genius, really. I mean, what happened is evil, and I'm totally against his ideas, but I just have to reluctantly admire his ideas, because they saved Marxism from the ash heap of history. So anyway, that's just a few thoughts, that what is happening in America and in some other Western industrialized democracies makes total sense. If you read into it, I highly recommend Mark Levin's American Marxism. It's sold well over a million copies, and it has 21,000 reviews on Amazon. He explains a lot about how pervasive this Marxist philosophy is in journalism, in the media, in the universities, and on and on and on.
Movies, entertainment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just saturated, and he gives an excellent explanation of what is happening, and he recommends what he thinks needs to be done. Anyway, Bob, thank you for allowing me to chime in. I sure appreciate it. Always enjoy your show. You guys keep outdoing yourselves, and I keep thinking you've reached the pinnacle, and then you top yourselves. So kudos to you and Jose.
We do our best, don't we, Jose?
Only behind you.
Thank you. Good talking to you, R. Carl.
It's always good talking to you.
Okay, so we got about 3.5 minutes to go. The next item on the card here is Kyle Rittenhouse, and every able-bodied man had a moral obligation to protect Kenosha.
Great article.
Yeah. I'm going to save that one for Monday. I'm going to kill a little time here just going through the Facebook comments until we get to that song that we all like so well. So we start out here with Elwin Champako, who I read a little earlier about what Underwood's doing as a colonized point of view. He also says that Elwin Champako Kitano says that Mong Mong Toto Aganya Springs was called Chuchuguan, water place. And William John Shadon, it's a relatively new poster, but boy, he's active, huh?
That's William from Utah.
Oh, that's William from Utah. Why didn't he say so? Bill Utah, right? Okay. And William says, exactly, and civil defense on Guam should include knowing how to shoot. And then William comes back and says, Pedro Lozama says Harmon Cliff Line. Then Elwin is once again the mentor for Things Tomorrow, and he says that consider Aniguan, Liguan, Matagwan, Sasalaguan, Apurgan, etc. And then Jose Martinez says, can you repeat that for us, Jose?
Which one? I've lost all my comments.
Ouch.
Oh, yeah.
And then William comes back. Bullying and abusive behavior is rampant and systemic in the medical world on Guam. They will take away their visa in an instant if from the mainland, cancel a contract. If you're classified, then you're local and nothing to worry about. That's William's gloss on the health professions here on the island. Let's see, Colin Clark. PDN and the Post are both media tainted with bias, and that's true. And I used to have high hopes for the Post, but when they came out with that July 5th editorial, they lost a lot with me. And I've noticed that from time to time, they still pull their punches. The Daily News seems to be getting a little bit more lead in its pencil, though. I'm glad to see that. Okay, let's call it a day. We'll be back tomorrow with more tall tales. And let's see, I always close with this saying, let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Fox News. A large crowd turned out in Waukesha, Wisconsin last night for a candlelight vigil for the 5 people killed and 4 dozen injured when a driver raced an SUV through the city's Christmas parade on Sunday.
We remember Wilhelm Haspel, Virginia Sorensen.
Leanna Owen.
3 of the 5 killed were senior citizens, part of the Dancing Grannies who were marching in the parade.
Police have now identified the suspect as 39-year-old Darrell E. Brooks Jr. Brooks is a Milwaukee man with a criminal history dating back to 1999. He's listed as a registered sex offender in Nevada.
And Fox's Matt Finn reports the suspect was free on bail on charges he'd recently run down his girlfriend with a car. He's now facing 5 counts of intentional homicide. In an exclusive interview, Kyle Rittenhouse telling Fox's Tucker Carlson tonight he believes his prosecution on murder charges following the Kenosha riots was politically motivated.
I didn't know I was going to be arrested for defending myself because everything was on video. But part of the reason I think I was arrested is because of the mob mentality.
Rittenhouse says he believes there was misconduct by the prosecutor in his case. He was acquitted Friday on all charges, the jury finding he acted in self-defense. Monday's deadline is passed for federal employees to be vaccinated against the coronavirus. The AP reports 90% of federal employees are now in compliance. The White House now strongly encouraging all fully vaccinated adults to get booster shots. Dr. Anthony Fauci says because they increase the vaccine's effectiveness.
When you compare the protection of 2 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech to 3, you went from 63% up to 94%.
America is listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, featuring insight from top newsmakers, reporters,